And it looks like we are once again live. All
All
right.
right.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our latest VodCast. I don't know how many people are actually watching live right now, but we are absolutely thrilled today, as you can see from our banner. Kim Meldrum has graciously decided to join us today. We're very, very happy to have her here. She literally wrote the book on formative assessments. So if you have any questions that pop up throughout this chat or any time afterwards, feel free to shoot questions over. She's very, very out there, very forward facing about formative assessments and about everything she does with it. She's been doing this for quite some time now. Presented her findings and everything at ISTE for a couple of years. We were just talking about ISTE in our last, well, prior to this going live. So, Kim, it's absolutely fantastic to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's always fun to talk to you too and to talk about technology as a tool for learning and assessment. So it's great. I really appreciate it.
We're really, really excited.
Yeah, it is great to have you here. So, Kim, we just want to kind of start off with, you've done so much with blending of the curriculum and technology, as we've discussed in the past at certain events. At what point did you have that spark to really say, all right, this is what I want to do, and kind of lead the charge with that in education?
I'm sort of at the end of my career, right? I've been at this for quite a long time. And really, as soon as one of my colleagues shared Google Apps for Education with me and I started looking at the potential, I went, oh my gosh, I think we finally have a way to transform learning for our students. It was one of those moments where I went, wow, this is magical. And I mean, one of the selling features too is that we can do amazing things with our kids, but it's also pretty powerful tools for teacher workflow. So you got a dual sales pitch there, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you got to go to the adult learner and look at how does that make their workflow easier. And then what it can do for our students is phenomenal.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously, you're in with Google Apps for Education formerly called Google Apps for Education, now called G Suite. Was your district an early adopter into it? Did you guys jump in as soon as it started to getting some legs in the education sector?
We were an early adopter. I think we've been fully G Suite for at least 3 years. But what we did very differently to a lot of school districts is before that, and before I even joined the department, we had a long-term plan, and we worked with stakeholders in terms of what does technology as a tool for learning look like? How are we proactive in teaching digital citizenship?
Right.
So that when it came to going Google Apps for Education and we opened the door, so the filters were gone, we had done a lot of the proactive work, which really helped us, because what I'm finding with a lot of school districts is they tend to be in a reactive mode.
Right.
When things happen, or I go to conferences and I talk about the power of Twitter and YouTube, and people go, oh, but we can't use Twitter or YouTube.
I think that's very interesting. When you talk about that, everyone being very reactive when it comes to the thought process of it, instead of going straight up front about the digital citizenship. I think that's kind of a trait with IT in general. There's not enough planning out, which is why I like in education. See, I came over the last 17 years from IT instead of education. So to be able to pump out that proactive response with children, I think it's a great thing. And it's a fantastic thing within, having that curriculum based with education.
Well, and that's a really good point, and it really talks to my colleague who's a Google Apps administrator, Tony Fuoco, and I have done workshops together at conferences on how that marriage between educational services and IT is so important. And we were actually in Ottawa, Canada, a couple of years ago doing one of those sessions, and someone in the audience said, "Excuse me, but could I stop you?" And Tony and I kind of looked at each other like, yes, okay. And she says, I want to say something. And this was the tone.
Very formative. You have to
do this. Our session, right? I said, what is it? She said, I just want to compliment the two of you. She says, never in my career in education and at tech conferences have I seen someone from IT co-presenting with a pedagogical consultant.
I love it.
And we said, I wanted to bring me to tears, right? Because what a powerful thing for her to voice, and what a powerful thing for us to be sharing in the community of educational technology about how this is so, so important. And so that's why it's so neat with you guys asking to talk to me, because you guys are IT guys, but yet you're not, right?
Right.
That whole pedagogical piece down pat as well. So it's really important.
That's great. And I'm sorry, I'm going to take over
That's
from Eric.
right. That's
Eric's
fine.
actually behind me for
You
those
do it
watching
anyway.
this later.
You
But
do it anyway.
with you actually told that story, the exact same story, as I was sitting in a classroom in Burlington, Mass. And it was the exact same thing, because at that point I was still highly into the IT phase of things. And you spoke about how you and your colleague did these presentations, and that's what struck home with me. So is actually we have you to thank to be the one that actually started getting me to go away from just being strict IT and going into more of that ed tech type of role. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. That's great. It's always nice when you hear you've had a positive impact. That's super.
Yeah, and that blend, like you stated about IT and TI, I mean, tech integration and informational technology, I think that's been huge. You know, as Tom said, he came from the business world, which was an interesting hire on my part, because I wanted that eye, right? I want to be able to pull in some, because I'm a teacher at heart and then got into the tech field. But I definitely wanted that angle of what does it kind of look like from the business model of secure everything, buy the equipment, look at the budget dollars first. And then I had the opposite angle of what do we need to do pedagogically, right? To give students the best thing for them, and what's going to work the best for workflows for teachers, and sort of coming together and find that middle ground, right, in our Venn diagram, I guess, of what works best for our district, but also maybe, you know, for education in general, which is great. So it's wonderful to hear that you sort of have this plan of what do you need first, buy the equipment and look at the tools second, because I think that shift is definitely coming, but I think for a lot of districts it's behind, right? A lot of people, they have their IT force that is very separate from education, and the teachers are handed tools and told maybe you can do some trainings on how to work the tools, and then they have to creatively figure out how they get the education in on that. Whereas it should be a collective sort of input and say, this is what we needed to do. How do we get the tools to adapt or to work with what we needed to accomplish?
Absolutely. And I mean, otherwise it just becomes substitution, right?
Right. We want to get to that.
$500 device for kids to do worksheets on.
Right. That's translative rather than
Call me crazy, but I think it does happen sometimes.
It happens very often, yeah.
The easy way out, yes. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong too, I learned a lot about the tech end from my colleague too, right? Because I didn't know what an OU was and all of those aspects that had to be put in place to make the G Suite implementation happen. So I mean, it was a great partnership and a learning curve on both parts. But I mean, our whole role, whether you're IT, teacher, administration, whatever you are, when you're working in a school district, our role is to do the best that we can to transform learning for our students.
Exactly.
So, you know, being at cross purposes to me is completely counterintuitive.
Right. I agree wholeheartedly.
So to kind of go back into following our quote unquote script, we were talking about this ahead of time too, that we don't actually really script anything out. So for us to go through and have questions preset so we know what we're doing, it's a little strange for us, but we're gonna get through this. You talked briefly a little bit, you touched upon Twitter and YouTube and social media a little bit. And how important do you think it is to be able to go out there and spread the word about the use of technology? I mean, Eric was just talking as well about changing the way we view technology and making sure that it's not just a $500 word processor, as you were saying as well. How important do you think it is for us to be able to go out there and collaborate and to speak the praises about education and technology and social media?
Well, I think it's essential, right? I mean, it's 21st century learning, and you look at the jobs that our students are going to have in 5 or 10 years. In 10 years, we don't even know what those jobs will be. Right. But we know that teachers don't need to be disseminators of facts because kids can access that.
Right.
So we want to teach them how to be critical consumers. But the piece that I think is the main focus is around the whole role of creativity, and then having students share their creations with others through Twitter, through blogs, through, you know, if you're not comfortable, you can have a teacher curated website. Right. So that the teacher helps the students decide what goes out into the world. And then they're getting feedback and editing. It's making their learning authentic. They're still editing. And, you know, I always say to teachers, there's that marriage between digital and analog as well. Right. If you have a student who solves a science experiment, they write a journal on how they did it, it stays within the 4 walls of the classroom.
Yeah.
You have a child take that journal, take photographs of it, upload it to Google Drive, do a screencast, talk about it. They can put that out in the world. They're able to explain using oral language rather than just written language. There's so much information a teacher gets from that. And again, you get that incredible feedback from people outside of the four walls of your school.
Right.
It's incredible.
And I think what's great about that too is not only is the student getting the feedback, but you as the educator, as the teacher is getting feedback as well. I find often that when I'm talking to people, they get a little fearful and a little hesitant about going out and doing these types of things and having their students do things. One of the things that you have out there on your website is that you love being a risk taker in the classroom. You love seeing people out there doing these types of things, getting their students out there. And it's okay to go out there and say, hey, look what my student did. Look what happened in our classroom. Look at how we were doing things. You can kind of tiptoe the line between bragging about what you're doing and how you're teaching. And that's a good thing.
It is. And you're showing other people ways that they can do it. I mean, I have to tell you, there's in the last few weeks, I've had some really incredible learning. There's a child in a school I'm working with who's in the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
Well, he's an amazing coder.
Really? Yeah.
So I've got him working with Dash and Dot.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and his oral language is not strong communicative-wise. So I said to him the other day, I said, I want you to make Dash do 2, 3, 60-degree circles.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't get this Dot. I don't know what Dot does. So he looked at me and it's like, so the next thing I know, he's programmed Dash to do the 2 circles, and he's got Dot programmed to say after the 2 circles are done, way to go. So he's actually programmed Dot to have an appropriate conversation with Dash.
Wow.
That's incredible.
It's incredible, because what I said to his teacher, and I was talking to the principal today, I said, look at the language that he has that we didn't know.
Yeah, you couldn't tap into it before, right?
So, I mean, these are the examples of technology, too, that people don't necessarily think about, that we need to, when we discover these things, we need to share through social media. So I'm actually in the process of writing a blog post about him that I'm going to put on my website to say, hey, people, we need to think about these things and let's access everybody's passion and learn from that. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
It's amazing.
I agree. That is amazing. And I think you touched upon this before too, but when you break down those 4 walls and you kind of push this stuff out more globally, I've found that, okay, there's some fear behind it. There's a lot more planning involved. You may have to get more stakeholders involved to kind of allow that to happen. But in the end, those were the projects that eventually the kids realized, because of their larger audience, they had to excel at more. And the quality of work seems to go up a great deal when that audience expands, right? I mean,
it really, really does. You give them an authentic audience and it's very motivating. But look at, you tweeted out your pictures of your golf course, your challenges.
Right. Exactly.
That was a marriage between analog and digital, because the kids created them with toilet paper rolls, etc.
Right.
And I immediately messaged you and say, hey, I love that. I'm doing a keynote for a maker festival. Could I please use them? And I mean, the kids will be thrilled, right, when they find out that there are those creations.
Oh, I told them immediately, and you should have seen it. The pace of play just went right up, and they're like, can I see the pictures? Can I see the pictures?
Well, and I'll post it's in July, and I'll post my slide presentation on my site so you can show it to them and say, look, she really did show them.
Perfect. That'll be great. They'll be so
To be honest, you didn't have to ask for permission. You could have just taken it and he would have been fine with it anyways. He would be, this is great. I'm out there.
Yeah, right? It's another part of my job, teaching digital citizenship.
Exactly. Photo credits, yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to double check all the kids could actually be out there too, which was good.
Yeah, well, that's critically important as well. But I wanted to make sure that I gave the right people credit. Right. You're going to put it up on the big screen. You want them to be celebrated.
Right. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Speaking of celebrating people's work, you have your book out, Assessment That Matters. It's all about using digital tools within formative assessments. It's a fantastic book. I read it. When I read it, though,
I didn't even know he read.
Well, every once in a while it sparks my interest. It's a great and easy read, which is the fantastic thing about it. I actually laid in my hammock one day on a nice day in like early April when we had nice weather, and bells going. You can tell we're in a school. Look at that! Woo! But anyways, so I read it from an IT point of view of looking at these tools from an IT standpoint and how they function.
Mm-hmm.
you as being in curriculum and pedagogically, what was your inspiration for writing this book and getting that information out there?
The inspiration really has been the teachers I've been working with at my school district. I do a lot of professional development where teachers are released to come and work with me for 2.5 hours. And there's a cohort of teachers who consistently sign up. They have a really great growth mindset, and they've been working with me for a couple of years. And they really embrace the whole role of technology as a tool for learning, but then they keep saying, but Kim, how do we assess it? How do we assess it? Because they were used to doing that assessment through paper and pencil tasks. So I would talk to them, I would show them what assessment for learning really should look like, and assessment as learning. And then they kept saying, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And so they really were my motivation behind it. I mean, there's one particular teacher who I should give a shout out to, Rosemary Hill at Beaconsfield High, who just kept saying, you have to do it. And so thank you, Rosemary.
All right.
So that was really the impetus behind it, is because, you know, how is it that we can keep saying kids need to create and use technology and then be giving them these traditional paper, pencil, and tests? It makes no sense. So we need to develop our skills at recognizing what we're seeing in the process of creation, but also the rich evidence that's there once it's done. I mean, think about a video. Think about a student who's creating a video explaining a math concept and they completely understand it. Why would you then give them a paper pencil assignment?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And sharing, just to add this, sort of interrupt, but the sharing potential with parents,
right,
changes the parent-teacher interview completely.
Right. And I find this is good. I'm a parent. I have two elementary age children, an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. Eric's got two kids that are going to be going to school in the near future. And when you look at that, you separate yourself from the ed tech side of it and you go into the parental side of it, the ability to be able to see what's going on and know what your children is doing. It is huge for us to be able to follow along. And not just have a written report card that says, oh, yes, this person met an expectation. To be able to see the work that they're doing, I think it speaks volumes to us as parents.
That digital evidence of growth is huge. I mean, just in terms of pre-literacy skills, there's 2 examples on my YouTube channel of little Nina from when she was 3 to 4, and now she's finishing kindergarten. I'm going to do another video with her. So I use it also as a teaching tool to show teachers.
Right.
Let's look at her early literacy skills. What are you seeing when she was 3? What are you seeing when she's 4? And helping them identify that. But what rich evidence for her and for her parents to keep over time.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So powerful, and you want to celebrate that.
Yeah,
absolutely. You make a good point there. That rich evidence is key in formative assessment for quick hitters and sort of this intervention style, but it's also great in the long run to take a look at patterns and kind of develop those styles. Now, you use the phrase an awful lot in the book about assessment of the learning, for the learning, and as the learning. And I, maybe just for the audience's sake, could you kind of describe sort of the differences you see between those 3 and why you kept going back to that in the book?
Sure. I should have had my book with me.
I've got it. It's on the table right over there.
Yeah.
I was ready to go.
Is it here? Where is it? I'm the worst saleswoman on the planet.
Eric's got it right there.
Can I just tell you that? Oh, yay. It has a new cover now, though, when you go to Amazon.
Yeah. It's actually on the banner here. That's the new cover.
Oh, perfect.
I was an early adopter.
Well, yes, you were. Thank you. What we tend to do is the assessment of learning, which is the after the fact,
right?
The summative piece. And really what I talk about in my book is assessment for learning and assessment as learning. And if you think about when you're teaching every day, you're looking at what your kids are doing and you're giving them direct instruction or you're encouraging them. And those are the pieces that I'm talking about in my book that we need to value more and honor that, so that when kids are creating, we're encouraging them, but we're also seeing where do they need some direct instruction. But you know what might happen is 2 kids need direct instruction on the value of putting capital letters on a sentence, but the other 16 kids don't.
Right.
Right.
So you're not occupying 20 kids with direct instruction when only 2 of them need it.
Right.
And then it's that whole role of guiding questions. That as teachers, we tend to want to help And when kids ask us questions, we give them an answer.
Right.
And what I'm working with teachers a lot on is how do we ask them a guiding, encouraging question so that they want to continue to research, they want to continue to learn, and they keep going and challenging themselves. And if you think about when, I don't know, I mean, I'm older than you, but when I went to school and you got a mark on something, the message you received was learning is finished.
Right.
Right. And why is it we're valuing the product so much more than the process, when it's the process that as educators, we're spending 90% of our time on as professionals, and it's what the students are spending 90% of their time on. Yeah. So my message to teachers is you gather all of that information, and then you look at your curriculum at the end, your expectations, and you determine what level of success the child has, and you turn it into a mark.
Right.
I don't know if the way that education is perceived is different in Montreal. I don't know how it's structured in Canada at all, and I apologize for not researching that ahead of time. But I know, especially for us, stop shaking your head, Eric. For us, I think we spend so much time on sculpting out what we need to have as a baseline. You know, we spend so much time with you have to meet these expectations. Everything is set in stone. Is that you have to go and meet this out. And to be able to change that and to flip that model and to be able to say, okay, let's start with the instructions, see how it goes, see where things end up, and do we change our goals as we go along? The ability to be flexible like that in education, I think, is huge. So I think not only is that message great for teachers, but for administrators and state administrators and anyone else that's looking for this to say, look, we're trying to spark the children to be able to understand what learning is, not just have them regurgitate what it is that we've already know. Like you said before, they can go out and research this stuff on Google. You know, let's teach them how to actually to learn.
No, it's very true. And I mean, even if you had done some research on Canada, it would have been a challenge because our provinces all take education very differently as well. Right. But one of the things, like when I work with high school teachers, we're not as test driven as some of the states for sure, but we do have end of year ministry exams. But what I try to tell the teachers is if the kids have deep understanding of that knowledge, if they're able to apply it in different contexts, if they can create a video that explains a complex problem, or you look at using Desmos and the kids are able to create conics projects that, you know, have sliders and go well beyond the paper, then what we need to do is teach them how to take the test.
Right.
So that they can transfer that knowledge that's actually real applied knowledge to the test, because we shouldn't be spending our time with kids for a test that happens at the end of the year.
Right.
What we want is that real knowledge. We want it to be integrated and used in everyday life.
Right. And you mentioned this before. The process is where we spend 90% of the time, right? So if the product doesn't actually match the process as well, then we're actually doing them a disservice, and us as well as at the end that isn't even going to match what we've been spending all of our time learning.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work I'm doing with teachers now. I was doing that this morning with them.
There we go.
So what their kids are creating and what they're assessing are completely aligned.
I think our Eric, you dropped out of our chat. I think that's part of the problem here.
He looks like he's frozen.
I don't know what happened with Eric's laptop. He just dropped right out.
Come back.
Come back.
Hey, this is what we
there
do.
You are.
Just had a hiccup. I won't tell you what kind of laptop I'm on. How's that?
We have to be flexible.
That's right.
Yeah, we were just talking about this. Having the dropouts and stuff. As Kim is now actually at her she has a beautiful picture of a nice tree behind her. She actually gets to be at home because, you know, as we talk about the tools and using tools, the wireless, unfortunately, there was an upgrade to it, and it got. I just realized I talk with my hands way too much. I'm sorry. Your wireless got kicked out at work, and they did an upgrade to it, and so you have to do the Hangouts at home. So it's that flexibility within dealing with technology.
Yeah, that's it. There's always somewhere you can go where you can catch that Wi-Fi.
That's right. That's right. Thank goodness. So Kim, sort of as our final little wrap up, because we are the tech guys, what are some of your go-to tech tools that you use specifically for formative assessments, or the ones that you encourage teachers in your districts to kind of go to for that quick feedback and that formative assessment?
Yeah, that's not a really good question for me.
All right, well, let's call up to your partner and we'll get your...
With you, Eric. When I read people posting things about certain apps and calling it formative assessment, I don't answer them back, but I want to say that that's really teacher workflow.
Right.
Tools. That's not really formative assessment.
Right.
One of the things I do talk to teachers about, though, is how about creating like Google Sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and keeping your anecdotal notes when you're seeing what kids are doing. Just type it in, have a page for each kid on a sheet like we used to do with paper. But that's kind of, to be honest, one of my little bugaboos at the moment, is that there's a lot of chat out there around formative assessment tools.
Right.
And they really don't support formative assessment.
Yeah.
You're right. I think a lot of the times they kind of mask it with this is formative assessment when really it's just creating a better workflow for teachers or speeding up, right, that workflow for teachers.
Yeah, and it's summative assessment because what you tend to be doing is pushing a question and collating the answers and then pushing out a mark. So, I mean, that's why I appreciate you guys talking to me and asking that question. And I know you well enough, I can be honest about it.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, sometimes on Twitter, I read things and I go, is there a way to respond to that diplomatically in short characters?
Right.
Sometimes I just don't do it.
I actually had a chat not long ago that was very similar to that, where I got passionate about it because it was about the roles of ed tech and IT, as we were talking about earlier, and it was basically ed tech is the ones that are in the classroom, and IT you go back and break fix. And I was serious. I was flying through chat. I just had to keep going with it and keep saying it. You know, 140 limit, keep going. 140 limit, keep going. Because it's just it was one of those things, and I assume that you see so many people that tag you in these posts about this that it almost can get to a point where you're like, okay, I don't have time to review every tool to know if this is the meaningfulness of what formative evaluation, formative assessment are.
Well, and a lot of times people don't ask, right? So I just see things on Twitter and I read it. Sometimes I engage, but as I said, it's difficult and you don't want to offend people because you have to think about where they are. So it's always a challenge. I mean, that's why when people buy my book and read it, they get a clearer understanding of really what I'm talking about in terms of formative assessment, tools of technology. And I think a lot of times decisions are made on apps because they're fun,
right,
and have ease of use. But what really is their pedagogical purpose?
Right. Exactly.
That's the question, and districts spend a lot of money, and then the apps don't get used, right?
We'll pop up the book there again here on our tag, so everyone can
there it
see.
is. Go out and buy that, and then make sure you understand everything she's been talking about, because she's absolutely right. Again, it's not about the tech, it's not about the apps, it's about the plan and what you want it to do first, and then go out and find, or even make the companies figure out how to make it work best for you. That would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Great, and that's actually perfect. It was just about a half hour worth of conversation here, an absolutely amazing, insightful conversation. We thank you so much, Kim, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you here this afternoon.
Oh, well, thank both of you. Both of you. Great to chat. Have opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again. It's been great, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
I'm losing audio on my stuff. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am too.
That's okay. We'll say goodbye and we'll be in touch.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care. All right. See ya.
Bye.